Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a PS2 game, and that happens to be a game based after the anime series Armor Trooper Votoms, which is a mecha anime that came out in the 1980s, and it's actually a really great one that I enjoyed quite a lot when I watched it. And there is a couple games based after this series, but this is the one I want to talk about today on the PS2. But maybe someday later on, I might have to do some of the other ones if they're doable. But anyways, so this game was published by Bandai, and it was developed by Yuke's. Yeah, the same company that made all those fun wrestling games that I really like. Yeah, they made this shit too, so that's pretty awesome. And it was released in 2007, so a pretty late release PS2 game. And it's a third-person shooter where you get to control mechs, and you also get to run around on foot. And this game's story is a retelling of the original anime, so if you've seen the anime and you really like it, then well, you're really gonna like it in this game. But in case you're unfamiliar with Armor Trooper Votoms, to sum it up quickly, is that the main character is Chirico, and he happens to be a badass ex-military man who was betrayed by his fellow comrades. And he always seems to find himself in some pretty tough situations, so pretty much because he knows how to ride mechs and stuff, he always seems to just hijack whichever one he can. So yeah, you know how in most mecha animes, like, you always have your main character has like the mech that's like that how you associate them with? Well, for this guy, nah, like he literally just like steals whatever mech he can. It's pretty great. And of course, there's like other characters that he meets along the way, and there's some other situations that they get involved with, and there's also an end goal where he's trying to find out about like the mysteries behind like the original mission that he was on, and a bunch of other stuff. I won't get too much into it because I do think it is worth watching if you are a fan of mecha animes. So let's get moving on to the gameplay itself. So, when you first start out, there's actually like a big map of a bunch of like hexagons, and that's like you have like your story missions and your extra missions, which allow you to get like more money, and also you can unlock extra mechs that you can unlock. And when you clear out all the main story mission hexagons, and that allows you to go to the next scenario, and there's actually 4 of them in total. So once you start up a mission, there's many variety of different missions you have to do, whether it be like destroy everything in sight, try to like get to like the main spot that you have to go to, which, you know, you gotta destroy shit along the way to get there, and then of course there's also some where you gotta like protect something from being destroyed, and you know, many other stuff like that. So when you're piloting a mech, the game kinda feels like the game Virtua On, mostly with the motion of how you move around in this game as a giant mech, and also you get to use your weapons, you switch between different ones, and you also have a melee attack, and there's also some special attacks that you could use which have some pretty cool animations. And in certain missions, you can actually get outside the mech and run around on foot, and if you see a mech that's unoccupied, then yes, you can actually steal it. So running around on foot is pretty much the same thing as being in a mech, but only that obviously you're much smaller, and you actually do a barrel roll whenever you dodge. So that sums up everything you need to know about that. So now let's get moving on to the game's controls. And I have to say, the controls in this game are actually pretty decent. So the button layout is pretty easy to figure out. So X dodges, square shoots, triangle is melee, L1 and R1 allow you to switch the lock on between different enemies, R2 switches weapons, and if you hold down L2, then it brings up like the face buttons, and this allows you to switch between different attacks if you press one of these buttons. And if you press R3, then you can actually switch to first person mode. Yes, you can do this in the mech mode and on foot. But I gotta be honest, I don't think this game was meant to be played in first person mode because it is a bit on the janky side. But when you play in third person mode, which is how it's supposed to, it actually does feel pretty good. Like most things, are pretty responsive, and there's no bad hit detection, but I do think that aiming in this game does feel a little bit on the slippy side. And just a minor thing that I wish this game had was that I wish there was like a more duck and cover system in this game whenever you're in the on foot parts, because I do think this game would have benefited from that. But other than that, and the slippery shooting that I mentioned, I do find that the controls in this game are pretty good. So now, let's get moving on to the other things, like the graphics. And for a late entry PS2 game, I do think it is pretty good looking. So I really like the character models and the mech designs in this game. The way how they look, it's pretty great, and it does resemble the anime very well. And the background graphics are pretty nice looking too, although they may not be like the most memorable looking like settings ever, but I think like they're at least well detailed for what they are. And the animations on the character movements is really good looking too. So as you would expect for a late entry PS2 game, I do think this is a really good looking one. I don't know if I'd say it's like the best looking PS2 game that I've seen, but definitely pretty good looking for what it is, and also, more importantly, it actually does fit with the anime. Given that all the backgrounds within the animes too is also pretty dark and bleak as well. And as for the game's music, the music in this one, it pretty much takes like pretty much most of the songs from the anime into here, and that's pretty great because I actually really do like some of the background music within the show, and also has like the same opening intro and everything, so that's awesome. So if you're like me and you've watched this show before, then you'll definitely recognize the music, and I do think it is pretty good and does fit with everything. And yes, in case you're wondering about the background music in this video, yes, it does not belong with this game, but the reason why I'm putting it in here is because the last time I tried to review a game that was published by Bandai, they really did not like what I was doing with the video, so they took it down, and I was pretty pissed about that because I actually spent quite a bit of time on that video. But in case you're wondering, it was on the game GoldenEye Garo on the PS2, so yeah, that kinda sucks, so I really don't want that to happen again. But yeah, going back on track though, the music in this game is good. So now, if you want to go out and buy yourself a copy of this game, if you do have a way to play Japanese PS2 games, then the cheapest I've seen it for was $82, and the highest I've seen it for was $106, and there isn't many copies that I've seen as of right now, so yeah, unfortunately, it is pretty pricey. And this game really isn't long either, so that's another reason why I don't think it would be worth that price. But still cheaper than GoldenEye Garo though, since I brought it up earlier, and I remember that game being expensive as shit. And thankfully the game does work really well on PS2 emulation, so not much needed to say there. So now, as for my overall thoughts on Armor Trooper Votoms on PS2, is that I found this game to be pretty enjoyable, though mostly because of the fact that I am a fan of the anime, but even for just the gameplay itself, I still found it to be pretty fun. So it's nothing groundbreaking, it is a very simple game that is easy to pick up and play, even if it is only in Japanese. And like I said earlier, the game is not very long, so you can actually beat this game really quickly if you just keep doing the story missions. But even with all that though, I did find myself having a pretty fun time with it. And yeah, like I mentioned, there are some small flaws here and there with like the first person mode is not the greatest, and then like the shooting is a little bit slippery. And I do wish that the on foot parts had like a duck and cover system. And also something else that I didn't mention either, but I do wish there was a little bit more customization with the mechs in this game, because you can upgrade them and whatnot, but there's not a whole lot to it, like it's not very in depth. But you know what though, even with all that though, I still think this game was actually still enjoyable. But I think I would only recommend it to people that have watched the anime before, because I think you would get the most enjoyment out of it since, you know, you're more familiar with the story and the characters and whatnot, and all like the set pieces. Not to say that people that don't know what Votoms is, if they played this, they wouldn't think it's shit or anything, but I think like having that more extra bit of like info and background on it though, you can definitely appreciate it much more. So like I stated before, it's nothing super groundbreaking, it doesn't do anything new or steer the wheel when it comes to like third person shooting with mech stuff, but you know what though, it was still fun to just shoot the shit out of everything. And the game's difficulty is pretty fair as well. So even if you don't know a thing about Votoms, I still found it to be a pretty solidly well-made game for what it is. So that's all I have to say about this one, so maybe at some point in time I might have to review some of the other Armor Trooper Votoms games. I know there's one on SNES, there's a couple on PS1, and I know the character Toriko has actually been in many different other games out there, mostly being the Super Robot Wars and such, which is pretty awesome. So it's pretty nice that I found a anime licensed game on PS2 based after an anime that I like, and yeah, I actually like it. I thought it was a nice experience for what it was. So with that said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.